All right, Ceramics 1, we are going to go over today clay, tools, and terms. Click. All right, so let's start over. All right, Ceramics 1, we're going to go over clay, tools, and terms today. This will be a quiz that you will take tomorrow. So make sure you watch the video pretty well, get some descriptions from me, and then the slideshow is available for you to look through as well. All right, clay, tools, and terms. Da, da, da. Can't even start petting. The clay that we use is, so clay is a lot of times called the clay body. What we use is stoneware. Stoneware is a mid-fire clay, so it's kind of like mid-grade, like low fire is the lowest, like 1800 degrees. Mid-fire is like 2200 degrees, and then porcelain's up there at like 2400, 2500. So we're kind of that mid-ground clay. We use something called buff stoneware. It ends up being kind of like a tannish, whitish color once it's fired for the first time. You'll see what it looks like in the bag when you pick up your supplies if you haven't picked them up already. We fired to temperature cone 6, which is 2200 degrees. Back in old school kilns, like the one we have at school is a digital kiln, so I just got to push buttons and it does its jam. But in my kiln in my garage, it's a kiln sitter. So you put a little cone in there. It's kind of like a little pyramid, and it sits next to a little apparatus. And as soon as the cone bends to the certain like degree, it turns that off. It bends at a certain temperature because the clay starts to melt. So that's why we call them cones, even though most people don't use cones anymore. Just for your information. My kid is trying to say click every time I do a new slide. Stages of clay. There are 3 stages of clay. The first one is greenware. Greenware has 3 substages. You have to know this one for the quiz. So greenware is any unfired clay, but there are 3 different stages. So plastic is fresh clay straight out of the bag. It's ready to use. It's bendable. It's easy to move around, and it bends without breaking. The second stage is leather hard. This clay is dried out a little bit, so it's like semi-wet, semi-plastic, but also a little bit dry. If you were to actually bend it, it would snap and break. But you can still attach stuff to it. You can still carve into it. It's not really dry. It's probably more wet than it is dry. We'll talk more about that once we actually get into building. The third stage is bone dry. It's very, very dry clay. It's ready to be fired. It's super fragile. Almost all the moisture has been taken out of it. The kiln takes out the rest. What? Penny smashed a bunch of clay at school today. She's proud of herself. She's making this entertaining at least. All right, so this is kind of like what the inside of a kiln looks like. And this is what bisque looks like. So this is our second stage of clay. First greenware, second bisqueware. The clay has changed chemically at this point. It'll change color, but it also has now become a solid state. Like it will never re-liquefy again. So if you add water to it, it's not turning into mud anymore. It is always going to be this hard clay. It is not usable yet for water. Because it's still porous, if you pour water into it, like, and I'll do this in class usually when I demo this in the beginning, you pour water in it and like 5 minutes later, the water is all over the table because it's like, it's just gone right through it. So it can still absorb water, but it can't hold water. You need to click, that's why I didn't go. All right, the third stage of clay is glazeware. This is clay that has had a glaze applied to it, so it was greenware, turned into bisqueware. After that first firing, you paint it with glaze, and then you fire it again. So the clay always goes through the kiln twice. Now it's come out with a glass-like coating. It makes it suitable for holding water. It's not porous anymore. It's really usually shiny and reflective like the ones in the picture. This one is matte finish, but it probably is still not porous anymore. It seals the pores of the clay. Penny, shut You're trappers. So the next terms that we're going to go over are slip, score, and meld. So slip is a mixture of clay and water. It's kind of 50-50. It's used to attach pieces of clay together like a glue. So up in this corner here, you can see this bucket of clay, and they're using a paintbrush to apply it on. That's how we do it at school usually. Or actually, I fill in, like, have you ever tie-dyed before? You get those little clear containers. I fill those with slip, so you can just kind of squirt it on like a mustard. I also make mine in a blender. You can make it by hand, however you want to do it. To score means to scratch into the clay. So some people call it slipping and scoring, even though you score first and slip second. I don't know why they've always said it that way, but it just means to scratch into the clay. And then to meld means to blend the clay together and smooth it. So you can see, like, my finger just worked to point and stuff. You don't see that. This little pinch pot right here has score marks on it, and there's a little lid right here. After they put these two together and slip and score them, they'll actually like blend the clay down into the other pieces. And that's called melding, kind of pushing that clay together to smooth it out and to attach better. Makes it stay together. You did. Why do pots crack? So this is one of the biggest problems we have, or that potters have, is that before they even hit the kiln, they'll crack. So wet clay contains a large amount of water, a minimum 25%. When clay starts to dry, the water evaporates from it, and as this happens, it like shrinks. So our clay has a shrink rate of 12.5%. So if you make something that's like 10 inches tall, it's going to shrink all the way around by 12.5%. So it's going to end up being like an inch shorter almost. So as things shrink, they like change. And if things shrink at a different rate, a lot of times like the bottom will shrink at a different rate than the rest. It causes stresses. Sometimes these stresses will happen before it gets in the kiln. Sometimes it will happen after. But it's really, really important to let things dry slowly. So that's something you have to think about at home and when you're in school doing clay stuff. Equal wall thickness is important. It will make things shrink at the same rate. Compression helps. Like this picture here is what they call an S crack because it's kind of got like an S kind of wave. It's the bottom of a pot off a wheel cracking. Penny's raising your hand for a question.
Is someone made like this block, but it wasn't hollow, so it kind of like blew up more or less in the kiln.
Oh yes, we cannot. You have to make things hollow and then let air escape. So if you made a solid piece of, or if you made a piece of clay and you hollowed it out, but you didn't have a place for the air to escape. So what Penny's getting to is that water turns to steam at 212 degrees. So when your clay is evaporating the rest of its water out in the kiln, because even if it's bone dry, there's still a little bit of water left in there. When it hits 212 degrees, it expands. If it gets trapped anywhere and it's trying to expand, it will blow up. So you always have to let air go away or have thin walls. Anything under an inch thick should be, I mean, an inch is kind of pushing it, but you always want to hollow stuff out. So sometimes it hurts other people's projects. These are some of the tools that you would see in class. You have modified tools for home because these are expensive tools and I didn't have enough for everybody in class to purchase all of them. They're shared for one class usually, and they're like common tools. So you have some of them, but not all of them. So this first one is a needle tool. It's kind of self-explanatory. It's got like a needle point end. In your kit, you have a paper clip that's going to act as your needle tool. It's for slipping and scoring, or for scratching and scoring. It's for cutting clay out. It has all sorts of like things that you can do with it. The second one is a ribbon tool. This loop tool. Some people call it a ribbon tool. Some people call it a loop tool. It's because if you see it in person, it kind of looks like this is made out of ribbon. So this is a small ribbon tool, and then you have a large ribbon tool. Their purpose is to kind of scoop clay away in different size chunks. It helps you like trim stuff down. Sponge is a sponge. This is a wire cutter. So you do have a sponge in your kit, and you do have a large ribbon tool.
Or small.
You may have a small one. It depends on when Penny and I made the kits. I don't have enough of each. Shut your trap hole. The wire cutter is a wire cutter. We don't have them, so at home a butter knife works good, or even if you have like fishing line is really easy to use to cut. Metal rib is for smoothing clay out. It's really flexible and bendy. A wooden rib will help you kind of scrape things away, shape things. It also helps smooth things out. You each should have a wooden rib and a wooden knife. Instead of a wooden knife for melding, you have a popsicle stick in your kit. So you do have some of this stuff is just a little bit altered for home. Next. What is a coil? A coil is a long rope-like piece of clay that has been formed by rolling and stretching the clay on a surface back and forth. Doing one of these guys. We'll do coil projects later on. Yep. A slab of clay is just a flat piece of clay that has been rolled out. There's a couple different ways you can do it. There's 3 main ways. One is here with a rolling pin and sizing bars. So the sizing bars are each like 3/8 inch thick, and then you put the rolling pin over it so that you have a nice even slab. The next one is using a slab roller. At school, we have a slab roller. And the third way is throwing slabs. I'm going to leave this link on the Google Slides so you can check it out. It's someone showing you how to slap a slab down on a table. Likely it's not something you're going to want to do at home because it can be like messy or dusty. We will compromise a different way to make slabs at home. Trimming can be done, like here you can see them trimming with a large rib tool. We have these things called rasps at school. They're like cheese graters for clay. A Brillo pad or sandpaper, once it's bone dry, helps smooth. Or you have a paintbrush in your kit. The paintbrush will help if you like wet the paintbrush on leather hard and you smooth over it. You can get into little detailed areas to really create a nice smooth. A sponge also works. How do you know it's ready for the kiln room? This isn't super essential for us yet. We might be back in person in March. We're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen. The point is that you want to have purposeful textures. You want to have clean bottoms. You don't want to have really rough edges. You cannot sand or fix after it's bisque fired. I have a lot of people want to be like, well, I want to trim this off. Not happening. It is rock solid, literally. So got to do it before. Now, recycling clay is something I usually do in school. Because of the virus, we can't actually recycle wet clay. So all clay has to dry out completely to be recycled. You're at home, you have your own clay, you have to recycle it yourself. Don't let the clay get dry. It will be hard for you to recycle it. Anything you don't use goes back in your bag and gets sealed up. Be really careful about not wasting your clay. This is what you have, and it's going to be what you use for the quarter. Wedging table and rolling mats, this is really not essential, not being at school, but if you come back to school and you start working on stuff, the wedging table is part of the room, and there's rolling mats that you can use. It's a work table in the back of the room for rolling slabs, but we work at our own tables, especially if we're going to be social distancing. We'll talk about glaze and stuff later on. Again, something not super essential to us right now. I have a clay mixer that looks like this that I recycle clay in. We're not even going to talk about the stages that we keep it in. Like usually we keep wet, leather hard, and dry clay away from each other so I can recycle with ease. Kiln room, again, another thing that's not really super important at this point yet. Kilns get hot, inside and out. Penny actually burned herself on a kiln once when I was teaching in Monticello from touching the outside. So always want to don't touch the kiln. It's expensive and it breaks easy, so don't touch it. And you're responsible for putting stuff in the kiln room, but apparently not at this point yet, right?
Don't touch the kiln.
Don't touch the kiln. That's all there is to it. Last thing before the video's over, I'm going to show you a video that's pretty awesome. I like how we have a moderator in the background right now. Seriously, be quiet. Why can't I make this bigger? Oh, whoops. Look at this huge piece of pottery. It takes 3 guys to make it. Could you imagine doing this on the wheel? They're all bending over. So this is in China where porcelain is made. Toilets are made out of porcelain. It's like the strongest kind of pottery you can have. It's high fired. It takes 3 of them just to center the clay on the wheel. Huge, huge process. Our kiln is probably like 2.5 feet deep by like 2 feet by 2 feet. Something along those lines. I don't know the exact dimensions. I can't imagine the size of the kiln that they're putting this bowl in. And they say it's going to be 3 times as high as what we see here. So just kind of a funny video to see. Again, I will leave the slideshow on Google Classroom. Tomorrow we will take a quiz on this. So make sure you overlook everything. By all means, split screen, have it open while you're quizzing. It's almost a form of just like taking notes. You don't have to like try to memorize everything, okay? It's just to help you kind of get the terms in your head. All right. We will see you later.